Ladies and gentlemen, it's 3 o'clock Eastern Time on a Thursday, which means it must be time once again for DM Radio. Yes, indeed, my name is Eric Kavanaugh. I will be your humble, if excitable host for the show that is designed to peel away the marketing veneer, get down to brass tacks, and figure out what is going on in the field of information management, in the field of data. Obviously, big data is a big topic these days. We're going to talk about IoT, the Internet of Things, on our show. We have an all-star cast lined up for you. First, a quick nod to our home and sponsor, Dataversity. The Data Governance Winter Conference is happening December 4th through 8th in Delray Beach, Florida, and the early bird special pricing ends tomorrow. So hop online to dataversity.net for more information about all that. And IoT, folks, we have an all-star cast dialing in from all around the world, quite frankly, and even yours truly. I'm mobile today, so I'm calling in from a center in Chicago where SAP Leonardo is taking place. And for those of you who don't know it, Leonardo is SAP's new brand. It's a really interesting concept designed to synthesize the component parts of modern innovation. So IoT, big data, analytics, machine learning, even blockchain gets woven in there, and of course design thinking kind of brings it all together from a strategic perspective. So I'm here, and I'm going to be speaking shortly to Tanya Ruckert. She's the president of the business unit for IoT. She's actually down the hallway in another meeting, but we'll bring her into the show as soon as we can. But otherwise, I've got a whole bunch of guests. I've got Jack Tarkoff from rfxcel. I've got Philip Punalak calling in from Site 1001. We've got Niall Murphy from a company called Everything. It's just EVRY thing, I believe it is. We also have Mark Phillips dialing in, and we have Ryan Shearman, who looks like he just dialed in a couple seconds ago. So we're going to go around the room and learn about what all these folks are doing in just a second, and I'll start off with just an opening comment about why IoT is such a big deal, the Internet of Things, as it's called. It really turns the whole world inside out. In fact, if you look on LinkedIn, I just posted an article last night for a company we work with called Visio. It's a consulting firm based in France. They have a whole practice around IoT, and they've really built a big, robust platform for dealing with IoT data. And once you start to understand how much information is out there and how much information needs to be communicated back to the mothership, then back out to the edge, you realize this is a big deal. And that's why IoT is so game-changing. And one of the things I like to say about it is that IoT data is like real-world data at scale. So now we know where stuff is. Of course, a lot of this really kicked off with RFID, those radio frequency identification tags that you would have in clothing or in any object that you ship from one place to another as a way of seeing, getting visibility into where stuff is. So, now on your cell phones, we have stuff like Waze, for example, which is using all of that data from all of these endpoints all around the globe, frankly, or at least in North America. I don't know if it works elsewhere. That is IoT. That's IoT. That is real-world data at scale being leveraged for some benefit to the end user. So with Waze, it helps you understand, well, take a left here, take a right there, don't go this way because the traffic's all jammed up. It's a real-time view into the world, and that is just tremendously compelling. It's fundamentally changing how we can assess situations, how we can optimize business processes, how we can understand what's going on and who's doing what and where. It's just mind-blowing stuff. There's a tremendous amount of investment going into IoT for the infrastructure, whether it's the sensors that are out on the edge, whether it's the networks, we'll talk about that today, whether it's the software to run this stuff and to let people see what's going on. All of these component parts are coming together right now, and they're changing the way business is done. So with that, let me bring in our first guest. Jack Tarkoff is calling from rfxcel. Jack, welcome to DM Radio.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for having us, Eric.
Sure. So tell us very quickly what you folks are doing, because it's a very cool enabling technology. What does rfxcel do, and how do you help your customers?
So I'm one of the co-founders, and we were founded on the principle of providing track and trace solutions to our customers for both compliance and value. And so this is really an event-based solution that allows for visibility and providing exception management through alerts and notifications. So with IoT adding to this, it gives us real-time capabilities through sensor devices that are sitting on a cellular network and providing real-time data. So we've partnered with Verizon in doing so, and these events include GPS location, temperature, light, shock. There's a number of different devices, but the idea is that our customers then can take advantage of this information real time and know whether or not their product, as it's moving through the supply chain or even sitting in the supply chain, is okay or it's at risk, and then do something about it to change outcomes. So it's all about real-time data. We've been able to do this in the past, but it's not always been real-time. IoT changes the game for us.
Yeah, it really does. And you think about the number of times over the past, let's just be honest here, millennia, that something didn't get delivered on time, thus upsetting a whole apple cart of processes and transactions and business dealings and so forth. And the idea now is that we can avoid most of those problems and have really early warning signs that things are changing such that we can address them and just take some action, right?
Absolutely. And we can take it further, because when you start thinking about things that we ingest, whether it's pharmaceuticals or food, we've worked with live shellfish organizations that have issues that if it's not handled correctly, what the consumer eats could be very harmful and even fatal. So by being able to monitor that and know whether or not the product is good before the consumer gets it or eats it, obviously is very important. So there's a lot of great things and value that this can bring.
Yeah, and you mentioned pharmaceuticals. Just think about how expensive some of these pharmaceuticals are, and what you're able to do is provide customers with visibility into everything related to that shipment, meaning the temperature in the truck, where it is right now, if a pallet falls over or goes sideways or something. Because for some medications, I unfortunately know this from experience, if the temperature gets too high, the medicine is ruined, right?
Absolutely, and you're right. It's in the high value ones, theft is a big issue, and even a sensor like light, knowing that either the back of the truck is now open or the case has been opened, brings a lot of information so that they can actually start to do something and change the outcome. What's happened in the past is one of these events occurs, they don't know about it till after the fact, and by that time it's long gone and they don't know what's happened. So this, and we've done this with customers where they've been extremely impressed with the kind of value that they've seen. In one case, they had products sitting on the tarmac at O'Hare Airport, and it had been there for a number of hours, and they were able to actually see it moved after they made a call, and the authorities took care of it. It wasn't supposed to be sitting there. So that product would have been at risk had it been sitting there for much longer because of the time of day it was, and they would have potentially had to destroy the product.
Yeah, and of course that not only saves the company money, but that's life-saving in some cases. So you're talking about affecting a critical process that is really important for a variety of reasons. And I think that's an obvious reason as to why we see so much investment now in IoT, because the value proposition is clear as a bell, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, visibility in the supply chain has been something most companies have been wanting to get for a long time. How they've been able to achieve that, or the lack of real-time capability, has been an issue. And IoT devices like these sensor devices that we use on the Verizon network provide that. And it is interesting, because some will say all I need is location, or all I need is location and temperature. But again, depending on the product, depending on how it has to be handled, there's other sensors, including battery life or even jamming of the signal, so that they know what's happening if there is a problem.
Yeah, that's a really big deal, and you provide the capability to make adjustments to that, so the end user, the customer, can change something. Say, okay, I want an alert if it gets to 20 degrees Fahrenheit as opposed to 25 degrees. That's the kind of visibility and flexibility that you're enabling with your software, right?
Absolutely, and flexibility. There's a configuration you can start with. And then as certain events occur that are potential issues, you can change that configuration. You can ping the device at any point in time. There's all sorts of things you can do, but it's having that initial information when it's a problem There's a ton of data that's being generated through just general track and trace, and then with the IoT devices, what you really want is to know when there's an issue, deal with that exception. All the other data is logged and is tracked, but it's really the exception management that you want, so when there's a problem, you can do something about it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there with exception management, and I think this is where all these different dependencies come into play. So if you're able to give visibility to your customers, you're able to build in a visualization of their workflow, and that can probably even help them better understand their own business, right?
Oh, absolutely. And today they struggle with the kind of information they get today. Typically, it's either outdated. They may get something, flash drive with information that's 4 or 5 days after the fact. It may not have location information. If it's a temperature, a piece of data that they get, it may not have the location associated with it. And they're trying to manage all these things of what goes on. And even with their partners, if they use third-party logistics organizations, they have certain agreements that the third-party logistics organizations are supposed to adhere to. And in what we've done with our customers, they've been able to get visibility that shows different things are happening than what they're being told. So it's, whether they split shipments, which they're not supposed to do unless they tell them. In one case, it was they had product at a different airport than what was being displayed on the 3PL's portal. So it's very interesting when they start taking control and getting this data and seeing the exceptions and what they can do with it to manage their business and make sure their product is okay. And ultimately, if it's pharmaceuticals, their patients are okay. If it's food, the consumers are okay. If it's a high-valued product, that it's not being stolen and that they're protecting their investment.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff. I tell you what, stick around for the roundtable. Let's bring in our next guest. We've got Philip Pondelak calling in from Site 1001. Philip, we were joking, you're down there in La Jolla, and I'm jealous because I'm in Chicago and it's cold and rainy. It's probably nice where you are. But tell us very quickly about Site 1001, what you folks are doing, and what smart buildings are all about.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk to you and other guests and our audience, of course. So Site 1001 is a very unique startup. What we do is we build what we call central nervous systems for buildings, meaning we use IoT technologies to turn regular buildings into smart, healthy buildings. And our goal is to obviously improve safety and comfort of people inside these buildings, around the buildings, but also help different other stakeholders like facility managers, building owners, to keep the buildings healthier, in good shape, to basically improve the whole management process for these buildings. And this is all around lighting, air conditioning, energy optimization, monitoring of different systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. Just to give an illustration of what we are aiming, imagine that you are a building owner or a facility manager. You are on vacation with your family, and all of a sudden you receive a text message saying, "Hi, John," or "Hi, Eric. This is your building, and just to let you know, everything is okay here. I've detected a small water leak yesterday, but it's all fixed now. I've shut down the water in that specific room, and I called Jim, your plumber. He did a great job. It's all fixed. And by the way, since your insurance company considered this as a preventive maintenance, they agreed to pay for everything, so there is no copayment. Enjoy the rest of your vacation." So this is the kind of a vision that we have, where the building is an intelligent entity and it can talk to you basically and lead you through the whole process. So all you need to do is really, enjoy your life while we do the hard job for you of making sure that we provide the whole infrastructure and the intelligence for the buildings for you.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff. And, I actually encountered something just a couple of years ago in Pittsburgh. This is the first time I ran into part of the process of smart buildings, where my wife was with me. We were shopping for a mattress, and it was very cold in the building. And we said, "Can you turn the air conditioning down a little bit? It's really cold in here." And the guy's like, well, okay. And he was just acted all strangely about it. And then I found out later he had to call the corporate, which was in California somewhere, and put in the request for them to turn the AC a little bit warmer. And I was like, you're kidding. Like, you can't even control your own air conditioning. But he explained that this is, gives those visibility to the senior executives, and they can control costs. So there are lots of benefits to this, even if there are maybe a couple little hurdles along the way, right?
Definitely. We believe this is a win-win situation for everyone. The tenants are more happier. They have a nice environment. The owners, the facility managers have an easier job. They can keep a value of the building for a longer time. So it's a good situation for everyone. And by the way, the situation that I have just described, what we do at Site 1001, it sounds a little bit like sci-fi, but it is becoming a reality. Just to give you an example, one of the smartest buildings in the world, the Deloitte headquarters in Amsterdam. And by the way, I think Jack is calling from there today, right? So anyway, this building has a system that allows all the employees of this office to enable a smart application on their phones, and that this application can control their local environment around their desk. So you can individually set the temperature for your own desk, the air quality, lighting, just specifically for your workstation. And I think this is a life-changing experience in some sense, or it's changing the way we work, right? Because now you can basically have a system that remembers your preferences, and no matter where you sit in the building, you may change your desk, you may go to a conference room, it will remember your preferred temperature, the lighting that you like, and it will just make that change in the environment just for you.
Yeah, that really is amazing stuff. And let me kind of ask you about the management side of that. So Site 1001, you leverage existing sensors, right? And then you build some software around that to help companies manage. Do you have special relationships with the manufacturers of the parts, or do you not really care?
We do, and the whole story behind Site 1001, how it was conceived, is very interesting. One of our founders, Eric Hall, worked at J.E. Dunn, one of the giants in the construction industry in the United States. And there he realized that there is an opportunity to create a better software system for facility management. Basically a system where you could gather all the information about the building, the design information, all the systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems in one place, and make it easily available for facility managers. Not only having everything in one place, nicely displayed, by basically having something that will guide facility managers in their job, such that they don't have to worry about, okay, what's next on my agenda or my schedule. Basically, the system would make recommendations for what needs to be done. So what's special about Site 1001 is that we not only collect information from sensors, we not only help install these sensors in the buildings, but we basically have the whole documentation about the building in place. And we can combine this information in a very unique proprietary way and provide more insight to different stakeholders about this specific building.
Yeah, that's really cool stuff. And I tell you what, folks, speaking of cool, I have to say we're doing something special on DM Radio today. As I mentioned, I'm at Leonardo Live, which for those of you who don't know is a really fantastic conference that SAP puts on to talk all about SAP Leonardo. And I'm just fascinated with this concept that SAP has rolled out. Leonardo is a sort of synthesis of the different component parts for innovation. So if you think about Internet of Things, this is a big change in the marketplace. Machine learning is really taking off these days. I mean, it's one of the hottest jobs out there these days right now. People who understand how to apply machine learning to systems, to things, to business processes. It's pretty complex stuff. Big data obviously is out there. Design thinking is a big part of it. Design thinking is basically the thought process about how do you identify the right problem to solve. And if you think about some of these massive situations that we're dealing with in big business as companies try to transform, dealing with social, mobile, analytics, cloud, all of these deep fundamental changes, IoT, like we're talking about on the show today, you really have to step back and think about this stuff, and that's the purpose of design thinking. So SAP has rolled out this Leonardo concept, and I'm pleased to be sitting right here in a conference room in Chicago with none other than the president of the business unit for SAP and IoT, Tanya Rucker. Welcome to DM Radio.
Hey, Eric, and it's really interesting. You know, we are talking about virtual world and digital twins, and now we are on a radio show and we are sitting face to face
That's right.
in one room.
That's right. That's exactly right. And Tanya, I happen to know that Leonardo spun out of an IoT initiative at SAP. Can you kind of talk about the genesis of Leonardo and where this all came from?
Yeah, we had a very, I would say, impressive IoT portfolio already last year, and it came from many customer projects around asset management, transportation, vehicle, connected fleets. But I think it was important that we also had a name, a brand, which really fits to our portfolio. And Leonardo da Vinci, I think, was an innovator ahead of his time, and it's multidiscipline.
Right.
That's also how IoT works, right? You need always algorithm, you need machine learning, you need to show it in a visually appealing way.
Yeah.
And that's why we decided for Leonardo da Vinci as our role model.
I love it. I just
and maybe Eric, Genesis. I think we realized that IoT is not enough, right? I think you get to data, you have big data management. You need to apply intelligence. You need to show it in a visually appealing way. What I said before, because not everybody wants to look at screens like from 10 years ago.
No, the user experience has changed, thank goodness, because those old screens were pretty cryptic, and you go all the way back to the DOS prompt, right? I mean, that was pretty intimidating if you didn't know what to type in there. And now, and I think mobile is actually a big part of that, of the transformation of design of user experience, because on the mobile device, you don't have much space. So the designers had to really think through which options are relevant at what point in the workflow, right? And so we saw sort of decomposition of business processes, and now, especially with IoT, you can really get this strategic view of the end-to-end solution, where from the device out in the field, how that maps back to your logistics planning, what the strategic plan is for the organization. All that stuff you can now see from in this environment. And to me, that is a massive game changer, right?
And I think the mobile, let's be very concrete. I think I have the opportunity to be in manufacturing, because I'm also responsible for manufacturing industry for all, where Leonardo and IoT plays a big role. And there you see all kinds of devices, right? You see big screens where you work together also with robots or half automated. People walk around with iPads, and it needs to be all touch screens, or a completely different user experience on all kinds of devices. And if we are not offering that way, including 3D visualization, and I talk also dynamic 3D visualization, you will never have the workers also behind your solution. They would also rather see it as a threat. And now with this new way of touching and working on the screen, I think it's more an advantage. It's much easier for them.
Wow. That's a good point. And I'm glad you mentioned manufacturing, because that's really where a lot of this stuff came from, right? Manufacturing, because if the equipment is so expensive, it really behooves these companies to stay on top of what's happening with this device, that device. In fact, the whole concept of predictive of this big manufacturing world, like I remember it was probably 16 years ago, I was interviewing a consultant who was telling me that he worked with a firm that had the Air Force as a contract, and they were doing predictive maintenance like 20 years ago, because you could gather the data and then see, well, every time this part fails, we notice that this part fails. That's when you can start piecing together the big picture. And so now we have a situation where that's becoming much more mainstream, where many more organizations are able to use that. And we talked about this actually back at the Trenitalia experience in Rome, where, and this I think is one of the most important points to make about predictive maintenance. It used to be that the people who were in charge of maintenance just had to go through, look at this wheel, look at that wheel, look at this door, look at that door. You almost never found a problem. And so the mind just kind of gets dull and you're just bored with your job. Well, now with predictive maintenance, you know that there's going to be a problem. You can tell from the data, this part is going to break probably in the next, 10 to 15 days. That's important. Now the person checking is like, no, I got to get this right?
And it goes beyond, I think, the topic of remote inspection or virtual inspection. Think about wind turbines out in the North Sea. I think it's an absolute must. No one really wants to travel there. But it goes hand in hand, we started now with asset management and manufacturing. I think it's also the notion of the digital twin. I think that you don't always have the physical assets, right? You have the visual representation, high fidelity or low fidelity, depending on how complex the asset is.
Right.
And this digital twin goes end to end. I think you also said, while it started in manufacturing, but asset was key, but it starts actually in product design.
Right.
Because when you do asset management, predictive maintenance, you go to prescriptive maintenance, you influence again the product design.
Wow.
And I think that's one of the advantages SAP can bring is integrated in all those business processes. Yeah, we have the design process, you have the collaboration, you have the virtual representation, you have a network or Facebook of all the assets, you know where they are, what is the asset health, how can you extend the lifetime, coming back to the asset optimization. And it should be not in one department, it should be cross departments.
Right.
And ideally cross companies.
Right. Well, that's actually an interesting segue. And before we bring in our next guest, let me just throw a couple more questions at you about that. Because, and not to get into blockchain, I'll just kind of reference blockchain, but we are going to now see these truly interconnected supply chains, right? Things like smart contracts. Right? This is just wildly game-changing stuff. And I think it's all for the better, because now we can see, we have visibility into who we can trust, into where the contracts were. A lot of the gray area that used to give us trouble or keep us up at night is going to be gone, right?
I think what we do with SAP Leonardo, we want to make it simple.
Right.
We have all those technologies, and you already mentioned IoT, machine learning, and now you mentioned blockchain. Bring it together, pre-integrated, pre-configured, and where you need it. So blockchain is obviously a big thing, but it's not solving world hunger, and you don't need it everywhere.
Right, that's right.
But I think you can be very specific. For example, blockchain you need in a track and trace scenario. Blockchain, you mentioned smart contracts. If you are in transportation business, bill of lading is a natural one. We are working with many 3D printing companies. We have this network of manufacturing, distributed manufacturing. You have to hand over a specification down to a 3D printing company, and I think that needs to be in a secure way. Every time you have a collaborative, distributed environment, where you need to have some secure transmission of data or contracts. There we will apply it. Also, and the last example here, in our asset intelligence network, the Facebook of assets, you have a lot of documents there. It's important, especially as we collaborate between manufacturers, service providers, and operators, that they are transferred in a safe way, and that's what we are using blockchain for.
Well, and that's all really, really good information. And folks, I hope you're following along, because this is a sort of overview of everything that's coming together to change how business is done today. This is digital transformation defined, is what we're discussing. And I'll throw one last question over at you. When I was at Frankfurt Leonardo Live earlier this year, I was talking to your good friend, Hans Stahlbauer, Senior VP at Digital Supply Chain. And we were talking about machine learning and supply chain, digital supply chain. And I said to him, well, you still need people to be there and safeguard and monitor what the algorithms are doing. And he shook his head. He said the most innovative companies now are actually letting these algorithms run digital supply. Talking Fortune 50 companies or Fortune 200 companies, which is just amazing. If you think about it, it makes sense, because the interdependencies in some of these really broad, complex supply chains are so complicated that a human being is not going to wrap their head around how to do that. So if you design the architecture properly, get the right data points in there, that's when you can let these machine learning algorithms work their magic, and everything is just wildly more efficient, right?
And I think you see it already in reality. Sometimes people talk about dark warehouses or dark production facilities. And it's not like what we heard before from Caterpillar, from Marty's, that he didn't have insights and visibility and no transparency and made it in our live factory. No, it is because it's all fully automated. There no daylight is needed there, because no human being is in the factory or is in the warehouse. While I believe there will be still exceptions where I think it's important that you have human interaction, it's also where we see a lot of machine learning is in supply chain planning. I think the algorithms can do a lot of the supply demand match, but sometimes there are exceptions. No algorithm knows from the first time, and you can only learn over time. So it's a journey to get more and more automated and to free up capacity for new business models for the people. Yeah,
that's right. I view this as all very emboldening and empowering for people, because now we can come up with the bigger ideas, the better ideas. We can do more fun things, right? Anytime you can automate something, you should automate it, because you don't want to be, out there in the field picking fruit all day if you don't have to, right? I mean, you want to automate the difficult, the monotonous stuff, right?
All repetitive processes
Right.
will be automated.
Right.
And I think we will also focus on new revenue models or also new pleasure ideas and new innovative things.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's move around the room here and talk to some of our other guests. We have Niall Murphy calling in from Everything. Niall, welcome to DM Radio, and tell us a bit about what you guys do.
Hi, Eric. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this discussion today. So it's fascinating. So yes, I'm founder and CEO of a company called Everything. We provide a platform to manage the digital identity of physical products. If you think about the fact that there are about 3.8 trillion consumer products made and sold every year, the transformation that's going on is all of those physical things turning from being passive objects that are shipped out into the world to active things that can generate data and drive services and deliver insight and so forth. So the question is really, how do they do that? So what we do is provide a platform that gives each individual product item a digital identity in the cloud, just like a human being has a LinkedIn profile or a Facebook profile, and that is how we discover information about people and indeed how the whole sort of social graph application ecosystem works. We give a similar capability to a physical thing, which we call an active digital identity, and that persistent identity on the web means that the data from and about a physical product item can become accessible to applications, can participate in the web. About 10 years ago now, Bruce Sterling at South by said rather flippantly, why can't I Google my shoes? And I found that a very inspiring statement. Well, why aren't physical things as part of a native part of the web as digital things are? When we look for a document, we Google it, right? And so as we give every physical thing in the world a digital identity on the web, then they will become as Googleable as any digital assets. And that means we can mobilize that information from items and connect it into the rest of the digital ecosystem to drive all sorts of interesting applications.
Yeah, that's just amazing stuff. And for the benefit of our audience, can you talk for a bit about graph technology and why graph is so important for being able to navigate very large, complex systems and understand relationships and that kind of thing? Talk about what graph is and what it means.
Well, when we look at very complex sets of information that are not well structured, so if we're describing all the things in the world, there's many different interrelationships between those things, and so the web actually provides a fantastic model because of the basic concepts of the hyperlink, right? We can build connections between bits of information in a very flexible and dynamic kind of fashion. So when we look at how this relates to the Internet of Things, what we have an ability to do is organize all sorts of disparate bits of information around about physical things and turn that into a very navigatable web. That then allows applications to surf that information, so to speak, transact with that information, and that's what we've done with human data, as I said earlier, with human identity through social networks, and now we can do that with physical things.
Yeah, that's just an amazing technology that you have here. It's almost like a phone book for stuff, right?
That's correct. And when we look at how things are actually manufactured and distributed into the world, there's actually many different parties involved. A producer makes a raw material. That raw material gets supplied to a manufacturer. A manufacturer combines that to make a product. The product then flows through to a distributor and a retailer and ends up in the hands of a consumer. And then the consumer maybe ultimately passes that on to somebody else and it gets disposed of, right? And so all of those parties want to participate in or are participating in the journey of a product. So now what we can do is follow that digital life cycle, organize the data about that product throughout its journey, and that brings all sorts of opportunities for insight and efficiency, and all sorts of opportunities to deliver new types of services and experiences. I referenced the 3.8 trillion products made and sold to consumers every year. It's a massive number. And there are huge economies of inefficiency in that. The world's counterfeit economy is about a $1.3 trillion economy. Parallel trade costs the consumer products industry, hundreds of billions of dollars every year. And essentially, these are problems driven by lack of insight, lack of visibility. And so, turning on the data from physical things offers businesses a lot of benefit, and obviously offers consumers a lot of benefit with more efficiency around their products and services that come with their products.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the visibility is the key component, right? I mean, that's what I think is so dramatically changing how we view our world. The fact that you can see into your home from across the other side of the planet. You can change the temperature in your house, per Philip's comment a few minutes ago. And I think it's going to take a while for people to really wrap their heads around how big a shift this is. Is that your opinion?
I think it's a dramatic shift, and it's more than simply incremental functionality. It's complete changes in business model. When we think about our physical objects, their utility and their functionality has been contained to what they are in our hands. But as they become digital things, then they become complete deliveries of service. So an example of this in the one of our partners is in the lighting industry, and we're managing data from connected lights. Now, that obviously allows you to control the light, but as a light becomes an active sensor, and essentially an LED is a PC board that can generate light, but it can also do all sorts of other sensing, environmental sensing, motion sensing, temperature sensing, and so forth. That means the light becomes a data generator. And in many cases, the value of the data that it can generate is greater than the value of the physical light itself, right? Which means that the business model of a lighting company shifts from selling lights to selling data. And that same sort of implication and opportunity arises for a lot of businesses as products become digitized. Am I buying the product, or am I buying the service associated with that product, and how does the digitization of the product shift that business model?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You kind of hit on some other big topic here that we can dive into, which is that, so what are you selling? Is it the product? Is it the services around the product? And a lot of times it's both. And there are lots of other enabling technologies. That's a segue to our last guest here. Mark Phillips is calling in from a company called Helium. Welcome to DM Radio.
Thank you very much, Eric.
So tell us a bit about what you guys do, because this is just another fascinating angle on the whole equation. You are providing networks for connected devices, right?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear all the panelists here kind of chime in before me, because we definitely cut across a lot of what they've built, and it's kind of fascinating to see it all come together. So Helium was founded in 2013 to solve what we thought was a huge barrier to entry for kind of fulfilling the IoT promise, which was that connecting devices to the internet was fundamentally too difficult. So, at the time, you had cellular networks pushing the ability to, build sensing devices based purely on cellular modules. You've got Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, which are great for smaller deployments of applications that need to be connected that don't necessarily need huge range. But you did not have anything that was really providing the ability to connect to something small that had to run on battery for a number of years and send data kind of constantly, small packets that had to be secure. And so that's why Helium was founded. And so fast forward about, 4 years now, past when we were founded, what we have is what we feel is the best combination of hardware and software to build end-to-end connected sensing applications. And so what that means in terms of verticals is that, we're working with companies across industrial, logistics and cold chain, building management and monitoring, some smart buildings and manufacturing to really help them take what they think is a use case that can benefit from connected sensing and roll it into either a product they're building internally to be used, and I can give examples of that, or something that they're going to be selling through as a package solution on top of Helium. At the specific technology level, what we have are really three things. A wireless module that does drop-in communications and security for a device. So a device would be like a temperature sensor, a PIR in a building, for example. And so Helium makes a module built on commodity parts and standards that you can drop into a sensor that will let it connect to the local Helium network. So this is created by a gateway or a series of gateways, and it's technically a star topology for devices to our gateways. And then this data backhauls to the Helium cloud routing infrastructure, where we then hand it off to companies to ingest it on the cloud side. And so your clouds are going to be your Azure IoT, AWS IoT, Google Cloud IoT, and then a variety of kind of internal clouds people are running. That's the end-to-end summary there.
Yeah, that's just really amazing. And it kind of speaks to the need for purpose-built networks to handle all this data, right? I think what we're seeing is a lot of innovation because there's so much pressure from demand, from companies wanting to use this technology. And so you're getting innovation all throughout the life cycle of the data movement, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, you're getting companies who didn't know that they could build something connected, or who have a product line in the field that may, rely on a technician to show up every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And they've got kind of revenue models built around that. But when they think about how they could, instead of sending a technician every month, build connectivity into it and add another layer of revenue on top of an existing product line, that, the imaginations of the Fortune 2000 product teams and the R&D and sensing teams at these F1000, F2000 companies just start to go crazy. So it's really quite exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah, and we are really seeing a massive transformation in terms of just the ability to use digital assets, to use information to make business decisions. That's why I refer to the information economy, because this is a new economy. You still have all the old stuff. You have widgets and food products and cars and so forth. But if you look at where the innovation is happening, a lot of it has to do with the use of information, and much of that is from connected devices, right?
Right. Yeah, and it certainly is new for these companies. I think the best way to put it is that most companies have been operating with tremendous and very talented IT organizations for a long time, but OT, or operational technologies, have not really made it into at least the products that they're selling. So what you're seeing is the kind of the marriage of the IT teams and the OT capabilities to really build something end to end. And it's still early days for a lot of this stuff. A lot of big enterprises are still trying to figure out how these two practices need to collaborate to get these things done. But it's certainly developing quickly and very exciting.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that OT, because I forgot about that. We talked about that when you and I first spoke. And I think it's a really good point that you're making. These operational technologies, the stuff that's out there in the field getting things done, right? Not the traditional IT that we think about, but the OT is what's in the field doing stuff, right?
Yeah, so a good example of that would be like a connected logistics application. So one of the integrations that we have on the cloud side is with Salesforce. And so Salesforce is, positioning themselves to be very instrumental in a lot of these IoT applications, and they're doing it in the right way. So they know exactly what sort of value they add, and they want to be at a point where the customer is pushing sensor data to Salesforce, but specifically the kind of output of the sensor data. So not the raw events themselves, but some sort of thing that can lead to an action that can be taken to better the life of the customer or other people using their platform. And so for them and for customers who would be building on top of Helium and talking to Salesforce, that OT component is something like a temperature sensor that is sitting on a truck reporting the status of a pallet in transit, where when that ends up at something like Salesforce IoT Cloud, they can then take action on it to resolve something in transit, for example. So yeah, I think that kind of gets to your observation about OT versus IT.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Salesforce, because I did not know until just recently the investments that Salesforce is making in IoT, but they're making big investments in IoT, and I think that's just fascinating. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm not intimately familiar with their plans. I can tell you that we'll be part of what they roll out next week in San Francisco at Dreamforce. Will be one of a handful of companies that they're kind of showcasing for companies that are first getting started building on top of their IoT APIs. But as I said before, they've done a good job of really defining where it is that they think they can add value. So, I don't think you're going to see them try to compete with pure cloud storage, for example, because that's not what they do. They're on the customer and support side, so they're going to build value around their offerings specifically for people who care about the end customer experience.
Okay, good. And let's kind of go ahead and bleed into the roundtable here, Jack. I'll bring you back in with the kind of solutions you guys provide. Really, what's interesting is we're seeing now the almost the proliferation of what was very esoteric technology 10 or 15 years ago. Now it's going to be everywhere. And to me, that's a very compelling storyline for small business and big business alike, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it certainly can allow smaller companies to appear bigger because they may have visibility into things they've never had before or didn't have the technology. And IoT kind of can provide that to them. So, and also for companies that are providing solutions, again, I think there's things that are, the technology's changing, the way people use systems. We're much more mobile. And there's so much data that everyone wants that exception management. So it absolutely does kind of change the game for, both large and small companies.
Yeah, and I keep going back to the visibility side of the equation too. When you know better, you do better, as they say. So the other thing I like is just giving more visibility into the business processes themselves, because over time, I think companies are going to realize where they can optimize certain decisions. And that's, I guess, one of the big points is that you used to have to make these big strategic decisions, and it was basically 15 decisions bundled into one. And now you don't have to do it that way. You can take much more of an iterative approach around how you manage your business and how you optimize your processes step by step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think it takes a lot less people to understand what's going on when you get this kind of data. So it just makes things easier. The visibility's there. If there's an issue, the issue's there. The kind of information around that issue is much clearer so that they can look at it and make, pretty easy decisions, where I think when you're lacking a lot of that, then it's kind of, you need a lot more people. You got to discuss it, and you are kind of throwing darts at a dartboard hoping you hit the right thing, but you really don't know. So I think this is pinpointing things in a much greater way. And I think, as we all have been talking about, we're all using IoT today. Even the people that don't realize that as consumers, they're buying devices or things that have it on it and are probably using it in some way and don't even realize, but the benefits are absolutely there.
Yeah, Niall, I'll bring you back in terms of visibility. I love this concept you have of smart products. And here again, thanks to the connected world, thanks to the cloud, thanks to technology such as what we're talking about on the show today, consumers can inform themselves so much more effectively than they ever could before, right? Consumers can really get access to tremendous amounts of information about what they're buying, how it compares to other things they could buy. I mean, it's a revolution in information availability, right?
Oh, it's fantastically fascinating. Consumers care a tremendous amount about the provenance of things that they buy. Where does this food come from? How was it made? Where does the material in this the shirt that I just bought come from? And is it fair traded and so forth? And it's been very difficult for people to get that information. And we're now moving into an environment where you can literally ask a thing about itself and it can tell you, right? We have a collaboration with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, for example, and this is a consortium of some of the largest apparel manufacturers in the world, and the objective there is to get provenance data, sustainability provenance data about product items directly accessible through the products themselves. And I think that's just the beginning, really, of that kind of visibility.
Yeah, things can tell you about themselves. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just wanted to say that, along the same lines, the vast amount of data can be overwhelming at the same time, both for consumers as well as for companies, right? So you can collect a lot of data, but if you don't know how to make use of it, how to draw insights from that data, it will not be as valuable. So it is
I think that's
fundamental to understand. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that's a crucial point. I agree with you. I think, this is one of the sort of the paradox, right, is that we're generating enormous amounts of new data, but does that generate value? And really, that's the other half of this is, generating data is one thing, but we've got to apply algorithmic intelligence and so on to generate insight, really, and insight leads to action and response and so forth, and that's the other aspect of IoT is the algorithmic intelligence elements that's crucial actually. Otherwise, this value can't be accessed.
Yeah, precisely, and I'm sure your companies also realize it. Definitely, our company Site 1001 understand that we can collect tons of data, but we cannot provide business-related answers to our stakeholders, or not necessarily just business-related, anything that is relevant to them in a way that they can consume, that data will never be as valuable. So we really try to focus on how to create better insights, how to use machine learning algorithms to generate these insights, and also how to use what we call interoperability, basically to do a fusion of different, sometimes disparate systems, and to take advantage of the fact that we have visibility across, in our case, all the different aspects of how the building is operating, to draw better conclusions and to provide better information, better insights for our customers, for our clients.
Yeah, and you really pick up a good point, Philip, and it kind of goes back to something Niall was talking about earlier. What are you actually buying? Is it the product? Is it the service? Is it the insight about a particular situation? And I think this gets to the whole concept of focus. And I really believe that in this new, highly connected world of information and insight everywhere, you need to really focus on what your value add is going to be and really understand your set of data, your problem space, because that's how you're going to keep your customers, is you're going to be that specialized in consulting with people about how they can use their information in a particular situation, right, Philip?
Correct. I couldn't agree more. And I think it applies to all the different industries where you collect data. IoT is just one specific example. It's a huge one, but there could be many other places where data basically are changing the whole landscape, and that, as you mentioned before, are changing business models basically.
Yeah, that's a really exciting thing for me. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Jack. I agree with the whole conversation. I think if you look at it, there's three things that are taking place. One was the lack of actually being able to capture that data, and IoT is changing that. The second is how you provide that data in a very valuable way. But the third is really each person or each company may have different needs, and it's being able to provide it in a way that is unique to those individuals or companies in the way they see value. So I think those three components are critical in providing this technology. And it sounds like we're all doing that, but I think that's the critical thing, so that I can get the kind of information I want, or others can get what they want, and it's still the same information that's being captured, but I may be alerted on something completely different than someone else.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And, as I think about this, I ask myself, and I'll kind of go around the room here and ask each of you this question. I'll start with you, Jack, and then Philip, and then Niall, and then Mark. Just give us your sort of 90-second version. How do you guys stay on top of what everybody else is doing? Because you have so much stuff to work on yourselves. Are there conferences to go to? Or what websites do you go to learn about stuff? Because things are changing so fast that you have to know where to look to learn the latest. So where do you go to keep tabs on what other people are doing? We'll start with you, Jack.
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer because there's so many places to get this information. But obviously, being involved in the industry, what we're doing in conferences, clients, talking to customers about what they're doing, and even our own employees. I mean, we bring people in and they're assigned certain areas that they need to focus on and provide information back to the organization. So it's not one place in particular, and obviously just reading in general and staying up on different things that are happening, because sometimes it's not even just specific to the market you're in or the business you're in. IoT in general is very generic in terms of what it does. It's a data capture of information that then, of course, as we talked about, brings, how do you manage it and how do you do something with it that's of value. So there's many different ways that we're really kind of getting this information so we become knowledgeable about what the industry is doing and other companies are doing.
Yep, good. And Philip, how do you stay on top of things?
Yeah, so I agree with Jack. And at Site 1001, for us, this is really a team effort. We have wonderful engineering teams, marketing teams, sales teams, implementation teams. All of them work together to share the data. And I have had plenty of conversations with all these departments, and the conversations with the client. This is something that we cannot estimate the value of it, right? How important it is to understand their needs first before we really start searching for solutions. We need to understand what the needs are. So this is the starting point for all our conversations. And then we have all the engineering efforts to really find the top tier and the newest, the best solutions for these questions.
Good point. Okay, and just moving around the room here some more. Niall, how do you stay on top of the latest?
It's tough. It's tough. But I think that some of the points we mentioned, our team at Everything, we've got a bunch of really smart people, and so we get together every week in what we call a think tank, and we pool knowledge and insight and debate. My investors and investors that I engage with are continuously scouring the market, so that's a great source of information and customers, right? I think the toughest thing to distinguish, is reality from hype, right? And there's a lot of debate about emerging technologies or potential trends and so forth, and then trying to determine what is actually real and what where we are from a timing perspective. Blockchain is in that department. I think there's really interesting application possibilities. There's very limited real world use case going on, and so there's I think aside from gathering insight, there's also a question of understanding meaning and real impact.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. You have to know what to focus on, separate the wheat from the chaff, as they used to say. And Mark Phillips, I'll throw it over to you. How do you stay on top of all the latest?
So similar to what everybody else has mentioned. I think if I were to throw out one tactical thing, there's a great newsletter from the team at Rethink IoT that they ship, I think, once a week, that has pretty high value content in terms of industry news across a bunch of different things like automotive, industrial manufacturing, big data, cloud, and AI. So definitely would recommend subscribing to that. To what Niall was saying, the space has been on fire for many years, but a lot of the news is very much hype. So we just try to focus on what our product roadmap is and prove that out with customer conversations, and actually deploying it with customers in the field to make sure that our theses around what we think people are going to need to build these things successfully are actually real. So that's what we tend to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. You do want to keep talking to your customers. You have to keep one eye on the horizon, I think, all the time, but then keep both feet on the ground, and that's where you're actually engaging with your customers, right, Jack?
Oh, absolutely. You have to be talking to your customers and working with them and continuing your business, but at the same time looking at new things you can do. They're always wanting to know what else we can do for them, and we got to stay on top of what is new, what the technologies can do, and how we can provide value.
No, that makes complete sense. And I guess I'll throw it over to Niall maybe for some final comments here. In terms of the future, how much different is the world going to be in 5 years, do you think, than it is today? Or are we in the midst of the biggest change and things are going to settle down? What do you think?
I think that things will accelerate. hopefully the complexity of the technology becomes less and less visible. And what's exciting is a world of smart stuff that is seamlessly getting on with doing things for us, so that we actually have to worry about less, right? And that's the big opportunity in all of this. And I'm pretty optimistic that the ecosystem's coming together in a way that will achieve that.
I think so too. I think you're right. We do need to know where to focus our attention, and that's a blessing, I have to say. I think it is going to accelerate, and things are getting crazy even around me here at this conference. I will say once again, folks, if you're down there in the Delray Beach area, December 4th through the 8th is the Dataversity Data Governance Winter Conference. That early bird pricing ends tomorrow, so hop online to dataversity.net for more information about all that. And wow, we have a bunch of great shows coming up over the next few weeks, and we're planning out our EdCal for next year. So if you have any ideas, hit me on Twitter, and we'll try to work them into the calendar. And with that, we're going to bid you all farewell, folks. Once again, you've been listening to DM Radio.